Welcome, teachers, to our Sanchalana session this month. This month, Sanchalana is going to be a continuation of the title that we had already started. The module is about Elements of Speaking English in a Classroom 4.0. So, in our previous module, we had dealt extensively about three language speaking tools, and we had mostly focused on the simple questions part. As you all know, that our Elements of Speaking English module introduced these three speaking tools to all of you. The simple tools for you all to use in your language classrooms are vocabulary set, simple questions, and simple sentences. So last month we had focused on simple questions, and we had seen how we need to know certain things to build our own questions. Yes, there are questions given in the textbook, there are questions given in the Kalika Chetarike handbook, but how do we build our own questions if given a topic? That is what we had learned in our previous module. So, how do we do that? It's simply called the question building process. So, to this process, we have three steps. Step one is learning basic question starters. Step two is using those question starters for vocabulary categories that we have already learned. And step three is building questions for specific answers. So when we follow all three of these steps, use basic question starters, use them for vocabulary categories, and then build questions to get particular answers, we're able to build a question. So let's go through this question building process one by one and see how we can build it. So step one is nothing but basic question starters. So we have come up with 7 types of basic question starters that we all can use on a daily basis. What are they? They are who, what, when, where, why, how, and which. And each of these basic question starter, like the word itself says, are words used to start a question. So if we use the word who, we are using it to ask for a person. When we use the word what, we are using it to ask for information about things or actions. And when we use the question starter when, we are using it to ask for information specifically about time. Where is used to ask for information about the place or location. Why is generally used to ask for a reason. And how is used as a question starter to ask for a condition, quality, or process about any given topic. And which is a question starter that is used to ask for very specific information. So let's see this with a particular example and see how these question starters can help build questions. So if suppose we are given a random topic uh, like that of a fox. So a fox is an animal that we all know, but how do we build questions about it? So let's just take all of these question starters and start building it. Remember that each of these question starter is used for a specific purpose, and keeping that in mind helps us build an exhaustive list of questions with respect to a topic. So a topic as simple as a fox, and we can come up with all of these questions. What is a fox? Where does a fox live? When does a fox sleep? Which animal does the fox hunt? Who is the fox afraid of? How does a fox find food? Why does the fox have long ears? So these are questions that completely cover the topic Fox for us. And that is the trick or the magic of basic question starters. So now moving on to step 2. So now that we had learned about question starters, how do we use them for vocabulary categories? As you all know, that when a given topic is presented to us, they have three basic vocabulary categories. As in, a topic has a lot of words that can be put in to talk about it, but it can be broadly classified into three categories, which are definition, features, and examples. And how do we use question starters for each of these three is something that we need to know, and that will really help us to build our own questions. So we've come up with specific question starters that can be used for specific vocabulary categories. So for example, if the definition category is picked and we want to build our questions based only on the definition of a topic, we can use question starters like what, how, who, where, and why. And if we want to base our questions on the features category of the vocabulary set, we can use question starters like what, which, where, and why. And if we want to build our questions based on the examples category of a topic, we can use question starters like what, where, when, and who. Remember that these are not the only question starters that can be used for each of these categories. You can use more, but if we check on the kind of questions that are generally built on definition, features, and examples, these are the generally used question starters. So let's see these with examples for a better understanding. So if given a topic like that of prepositions, how do we build our own questions? We've seen that we need to know our basic question starters, which we do. There are 7 types. And we need to know the 3 basic vocabulary categories of a topic. Even that we know. But how do we build questions on each of these categories is something we can learn with examples. So we all know that the definition to prepositions as a topic is simply this. Prepositions tell us where something is or when something is happening. So if we want to base our questions on this definition of prepositions, what do? Let's pick certain question starters from the options given to us. If we use what and how, what kind of questions come up? Questions like what is a preposition? How do we know where something is? All these kind of questions can be framed. Next, if we want to build our questions based on the features category of prepositions, we need to know what the features are. We do know that they are short words, they come before nouns, they indicate location and indicate relationship and time. And a few question starters that can be used for the features category are nothing but what, which, where, and why. What kind of questions can we come up with these question starters? They can be something like this. Which word indicates location? Where do we use words that indicate relationship or indicate time? You see how these question starters can be used for each category, but based on the category, the question changes a little. We need to know our question starters, yes, but we also need to know which category our question is based on. Finally, to the questions that we can frame based on the examples category of a topic. We do know that on, up, down, between, along, and many such other words are examples for preposition. If we need to base our questions on these examples, how do we come up with them? We again use question starters, but keeping in mind that they have to be based on examples. So questions like this can come up. When do we use the preposition on? What does the word on tell us? So these are ways in which we can build questions based on the definition, features, and examples category. But not always do we build questions based on only one category. Sometimes we need to frame questions or build questions based on more than one vocabulary category. How do we do that? It's just simple. It's a combination of these categories. So, if again given a topic like prepositions, we can come up with questions that are based on more than one category. So, they have to be a combination. They can be questions based on definition and features, or features and examples, or definition and examples. How do we do that? We can again use question starters and come up with questions like, which preposition do you use to indicate time? See how here words from both the definition category and the features category are used. Next example would be something like, what do we call short words that tell us where something is or when something is happening? Notice how all of these words are picked from the features category, but the answer is also based on the definition category. So that is again a combination. And examples level combination would be something like this. Why is the word between called a preposition? See how here both definition and examples are combined and a question is made. So this brings us to the end of step 2. Step 3 is something that we're all very familiar with as teachers, that if we want a particular answer from our students or learners, we need to ask them a particular question. So we are going to learn how to build these questions for specific answers. So under this step, it's simple. We have two types of questions. We have open-ended questions, and then we have closed-ended questions. So what are open-ended questions? They are nothing but questions that can be simply answered, that cannot be simply answered with a one word, which is yes or no. If suppose you're asking an open-ended question, it has to be a question that is free form, and it has to be answered in complete sentences or full sentences. It cannot be one word answers. And these questions are generally asked only when the person in front of us has complete knowledge or understanding about the topic. So, for example, if we ask someone the definition of a topic, we should be sure that the person in front of us to whom we're talking to knows the topic, has good amount of knowledge about the topic, and has a good understanding as well. And so when we ask open-ended questions to them, they cannot give us one word answers because they have to explain the answer to us in free form and full sentence. So that is exactly the purpose of open-ended questions. So we need to know what kind of answers we want from the learners to be able to build questions. And towards that purpose, we need to know whether our question is open-ended or closed-ended. So let's see how question starters come into the picture for open-ended questions. So if we use the question starter what, and we come up with what questions, what do they do? What kind of specific answer do they give us? They give us answers based on information regarding the topic. And when we're asking why questions, we are asking for reasons related to a topic. And when we're asking how questions, we are asking for the condition, quality, or process that is included in a topic. So remembering all of this will help us frame open-ended questions. Now to closed-ended questions. These are a little different or a lot different from open ended. These are also asked with a purpose to get a specific answer, but these are questions that can be answered with a simple one word, which is yes or no. They can be really short, they can be direct answers, they can be answered in both words, a group of words, sentences, or phrases. And all of this is possible under closed ended questions. And these are questions that are specifically based on particular aspects of the topic or the subject. So, for example, if you're asking for features of a topic, the answer will only be about features. If you're asking about examples, it will be only about examples of the topic. Unlike open ended, where when you shoot a question, you have to give a lengthy answer, and the answer can be talking about a lot of things in a topic. And how do we use question starters when it comes to closed ended questions? They can be something like this. Which questions are used to ask about specific information again? Where question starters help us ask for the location or the place, and when questions help us to ask about the time. So this is how question starters can be again used. The purpose of these question starters need to be understood, and they can be used for both closed ended and open ended questions. So, teachers, this brings us to the end of a quick recap of our previous module, which you all can find on our YouTube channel. You will find it under the heading Elements of Speaking English in a Classroom 3.0 TTM. And since this was an October month Sanchalana module, you will already find it available, and we hope you all have gone through it, because going through this module completely will help you get a better understanding on how to build questions on your own. So now, Michelle will take us through what we have in store for us in this module.
Thank you, Ms. Pa. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have in store in this module. Let's look at what we are going to cover in this module, or the parts or topics in the Kalika Chetake that we're going to look at in this module. For grade 4 and 5, we will look at milestone 7, that is parts of the body, and milestone 8, that is extended family terms. For learning outcome, or for grade 6, we will look at learning outcome 6.7, that is punctuation. And from grade 7, we will look at learning outcome 7.6, that is response to announcements and instructions made in class, school assembly, and railway station, and in other public places. So what are we going to learn in this module? We will be listening and practicing these steps. Firstly, we will look at an introduction to sentence building, that is 3 steps of sentence building. And then we will go through each of the steps one at a time. And we will also be practicing these steps in our own centers with speaking activities. So step 1 is learning the 2 blocks of sentence building. Step 2 is using vocabulary in basic sentences. Step 3 is adding information to basic sentences. So now let's look at what we have gone through so far. We've gone through the 3 language tools. That is, one is the vocabulary set, the second is simple questions. And in the last few modules, we have focused on vocabulary set, and we have focused on building simple questions, just like Ms. Pa has taken you through a gist of our previous module just now. In this module, we are going to look at simple sentences. Just like we learned how to build simple questions, we are going to learn how to build simple sentences. So, this module can help us understand how we can quickly put together, what we want to say using two blocks, or adding information, or enriching our sentences with vocabulary. when we are in the classroom. And here I just want to recapture what Prasanna sir said in the beginning, that let us keep in mind we are learning this module to create an English learning environment in the classroom. So let us learn this module with that in our mind. Let us learn how to build sentences so that when we speak in the English, in our English classroom, it helps create an English environment for our students and helps them pick up sentences easily. So, what are some of the things we need to learn when it comes to building our own sentences? There are three steps we need to learn in sentence building. Step one is we learn the two blocks to build a sentence. That is to build a basic sentence. Step two, we need to learn how to add vocabulary to our basic sentences. How do we enrich our sentences with vocabulary? Step three is now that we've learned basic sentences, how do we add information to our basic sentences? These are the three steps of sentence building we are going to learn today. Let's learn these three steps using topics from the Kalika Chetrike. So here are different topics that we have picked out of the milestones and learning outcomes that you have um, during this month. So we are going to look at parts of the body, extended family terms, punctuation, and response to instructions about announcements, etc. As we learn the steps of sentence building. Let's begin. Step one is learning the building blocks. There are two basic blocks we need to learn in order to build a sentence. Think of it as two information blocks. In block one, we need to think about what or who we are addressing. In block two, we need to think about the action or the description that we are adding to the information about the person or the object that we have thought about in block one. Let me explain that a little in detail. So, block one, we have what or who. That is, what is the object we are talking about, or who is the person we are talking about. In block two, we need to address what is the action, or what is the quality that we are describing about the object or the person, or what is the action that we are describing about the object or the person. Let's look at how we can construct sentences using these two blocks. Here is an example. What or who am I talking about? And what action or description I want to add. Let's look at the first example here. Here, I want to communicate the boy is running. So in the first block, I will address who I'm talking about. That is, I'm talking about the boy, and the action that the boy is doing is that he is running. So my sentence is the boy is running. Let's look at another example. Here, I'm talking about the bus. What is the quality about the bus that I want to describe? It's that it is big. So here, my sentence will be the bus is big. So here we have seen how by adding information using the first block and the second block, we can combine our information to form a sentence. Now let's look at specific sentences using topics from the Kalika Chetrake. So now let's look at sentences where we're addressing a, a person and we're talking about a action or a quality uh, regarding them. So here we have the king from the lesson The Fat King. And here we see that the king is lean and he is tall. So now who do I want to talk about in the first block? The king. What is the quality about the king that I want to talk about? It's that he is tall. So my sentence is the king is tall. Let's look at another situation from the same lesson. Here we see that there are several people in the dining room. Supposing I want to talk about the queen. And what is the action that the queen has done in this picture? She sat down to eat. So the queen sat down to eat will be my sentence. Let's look at another topic, parts of the body. Now, let's say I am teaching the topic parts of the body in my classroom, and I want to talk about the different parts of the body on the face. So, I will call up one of my students. Let's say her name is Anamika. So, my first block will be Anamika. And in the second block, I want to describe some features on her face. That is, her eyes are big and brown, and her nose is very sharp. So I will say Anamika in the first block, and in the description, I will say has brown eyes and a sharp nose. So my sentence is Anamika has brown eyes and a sharp nose. So this is a simple way in which we can construct sentences quickly. Now let's look at when we are addressing a topic like punctuations. Here we are going to use the block what, and then we're going to talk about an action or a description regarding each of the punctuations. So here in the first block, what am I talking about? I'm talking about an apostrophe. What is something that I want to describe about an apostrophe? It is that it shows us possession. So my sentence will be an apostrophe shows us possession. Next, I want to talk about a full stop. What is another action that a full stop does for me? A full stop helps me to end a sentence. So I will use the phrase ends a sentence in the second block. Therefore, my sentence will be a full stop ends a sentence. Let's look at another example. A comma. What is an action a comma does for me? A comma separates items on a list. So my second block will have separates items in a list. Therefore, my sentence will be a comma separates items in a list. Now I want to talk about capital letters. A quality about capital letters is that it is used at the beginning of a sentence, and it is also used for a proper noun. So I will put that description in the second block. Letters ca- they are used at the beginning of a sentence and for a proper noun. So when I combine the blocks, my sentence will be capital letters are letters used at the beginning of a sentence and for a proper noun. Now let's look at another topic where we are addressing objects and people in the first block, as well as actions and descriptions in the second block. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about announcements about school. What is a description about announcements about school? It is that they are made in school assembly, or they are made in a school assembly. So announcements about school are made in a school assembly. What do I want to talk about? Arrival and departure. What is a description about arrival and departure that I want to talk about? There are two kinds of announcements made in a railway station. So my sentence will be arrival and departure are two kinds of announcements made in a railway station. Who do I want to talk about? I want to talk about the bus conductor. What is an action that the bus conductor does? He makes announcements about a bus. So my sentence will be the bus conductor makes announcements about a bus. Similarly, I want to talk about shopping mall attendants. What is the action that they do? They make announcements about discounts. So shopping mall attendants make announcements about discounts. So once again, we see how using the two blocks or thinking about what we want to say or who we want to talk about and thinking about the action or the description that we want to add helps us build a sentence. Now, dear teachers, let's do an activity using the two blocks. Here you see different pictures on your left, on the left of the screen. Can you come up with sentences based on these pictures? You can either complete the sentences given for you or you can create sentences on your own. Let me give you an example. I will use the first sentence and I will say, the fat king, and I'm going to add a action is running. So my sentence is, the fat king is running. So let's move on. Now we have come up with lots of sentences regarding topics in the Kalika Kshetra and different topics that we want to talk about. However, we will notice when it comes to grade 6 and 7, there are a lot of instruction based activities or skill sets that you need to focus on. That is, a lot of the learning outcomes have instructions in them where you have to instruct the students and they have to respond. We also see that in the fifth grade, fourth and fifth standards in grades, there are activities that you need to conduct based on the instructions given in the teacher handbook. Now, can we use the two blocks to help us come up with instruction based sentences? Or how do we use the two sentence blocks to help us come up with instruction based sentences? So, let's look at an example. When it comes to an instruction, there are two things that you need to know. In the first block, you will mainly be talking about a person. That is, either you are talking to a person or you're talking about a person. So that is what you need to address in the first block. And in the second block, you will be talking about an action or what is the expected action that you require from the person. For example, if the instruction in the teacher handbook is ask the students to rearrange the letters or rearrange the pictures or observe the pictures, how do you come up with the sentence based instruction? So in the first block, you are talking to who? You are talking about or you are talking to the students. What is the action that you want the students to do? You want them to observe the pictures. So students observe the pictures will be a sentence. Let's look at another example. Once again, who are you talking to? The students. What is an action that you want them to do? You want them to rearrange the pictures. So, students rearrange the pictures will be your sentence. Now, supposing as a teacher, you want to tell the students to observe something that you are doing. So, who are you talking about this time? You're talking about yourself. So, you will say, I am. And what is an action that you're doing? You're going to read some announcements made in a railway station. So, your sentence will be, I am going to read some announcements made in a railway station. So, let's do another quick activity based on instruction based sentences. Can you come up with certain instructions using the two blocks, who and action? In the first block, think about who you're talking to or who you're talking about in your instruction and think about the action that you're describing or the action that you want. Okay, let me ask one of my friends here for an example. Okay, I'm going to ask Mispa. Mispa, can you create a sentence using the two blocks based on instructions?
I think something like students stand up is an instruction, and if I have to start my sentence with I am, I think I'll say I am about to read a poem. Please listen carefully.
Okay, thank you so much, Mispa. I'm sure the teachers also can come up with wonderful instruction based sentences using the two blocks. Now, let's go to step 2. Now that we've learned how to build a basic sentence, how do we use vocabulary in our sentences? So, we know that any topic has three basic vocabulary categories, that is, definition, features, examples. Now, how do we use the two sentence building blocks to incorporate more vocabulary, or how do we take vocabulary from each of these categories to incorporate in our sentences? So, let's take an example of the punctuation marks. So, this is what a vocabulary set for the punctuation marks look like. We have three categories: definition, features, examples. The definition of a punctuation mark is punctuation marks are the marks used in writing to separate sentences and parts of a sentence. Some of the features of punctuation marks are they are used at the end of the sentence, They are used at the beginning of a sentence. They are used to separate parts of a sentence. They are used to show the intention of a sentence. And you can probably add more features if you like. Some examples of punctuation marks are question, comma, apostrophe, capital letters, exclamation mark, full stop, and so on. Now, let's quickly do another activity. Supposing you have to come up with sentences related to punctuation marks. How will you use the two blocks, that is, what and who, or action and description, to come up with sentences related to the punctuation marks? You can either complete the given sentences or create sentences on your own. Okay, so while that happens, I am also going to ask for an example. Um, I'm going to ask my friend Kriti. Kriti, can you give me an example about a sentence based on a punctuation mark in this activity?
A question mark is used at the end of a question. Maybe I can say capital letter is used in the beginning of a sentence.
Excellent. Now we have used or we have created a lot of sentences based on punctuation marks. I just want to clarify that the previous activity was for you to create sentences about punctuation marks. Since when you step into a classroom and you're teaching students punctuation marks, you have to talk about punctuation marks. So please do try and practice that using the two blocks. Now, uh, if you noticed, you would have actually taken or used a lot of vocabulary from different categories to construct your sentences. Some of you might have used a lot of examples like question, comma, apostrophe. Some of you have used features about the punctuation marks, that is, that it is used at the end of a sentence or used at the beginning of a sentence or used to separate parts of a sentence. So, we already use different parts of a vocabulary set to help us construct sentences without knowing. So let us see how we can use a vocabulary set to also help us come up with sentences. So here we see the vocabulary set for punctuation marks. And if you notice, under the block what, we have mostly used keywords from the definition category or keywords from the example category, like a question mark, a comma, a full stop, or an exclamation mark. Now, how do we add actions or descriptions using vocabulary or a vocabulary set that you have created? If you want to add an action, you can use a correct feature, or you can use words or phrases from the feature category. If you want to add a description or talk about a quality, you can add uh, words or phrases from the definition category. And usually, when we are talking about the first block, that is what or who, we have already discussed that we use words from the example category or definition category. So here let's look at how we can do this. So here, what are we talking about? A question mark. Let us add an action or let us add a quality about a question mark, that it is a mark used in writing. Here, this phrase is taken from the definition. What are we talking about? We are talking about a comma. So, an action that we want to add about a comma can be taken from the features category. So, we can take a phrase from the features category that that it separates parts of a sentence. So, our sentence will be a comma separates parts of a sentence. Once again, what do we want to talk about? A full stop. Here, once again, I want to talk about a quality about a full stop. So I have taken or I have borrowed a part of the definition. So it is a punctuation mark used used to separate sentences. So here I've added that under the second block. So my sentence is a full stop is a punctuation mark used to separate sentences. And finally, what do I want to talk about? An exclamation mark I want to talk about a quality about an exclamation mark. Sorry, I want to talk about an action regarding a exclamation mark. So I have borrowed a feature. So it shows the intention of a sentence. So I've taken that feature and put that here. So my uh, entire sentence would be an exclamation mark shows the intention of a sentence. So here you can see how we have used the different categories to come up with sentences. Once again, let me reiterate it for you. If you want to talk about an action, you can use an example or a word or a phrase from the features category. If you want to talk about a quality or you want to describe something, you can use a word or a phrase from the definition category. So please do try and practice this at home. Create a vocabulary set using the definition, features, and examples of a topic, and try to come up with sentences where in the first block you address what you want to talk about, and in the second block you use a feature to talk about an action, or you use a part of the definition to talk about a quality. Now let us come to the final step, that is step 3. We have learned how to construct a basic sentence and use vocabulary in our basic sentences. But what if I want to add information to my basic sentence? Let's listen carefully. So we remember we have the first block, that is what or who. And in the second block, we add an action or a description. Now, let me introduce to you a third block where you can add information regarding a reason, a process, a time, or a place. So, under the first block, we talk about who or what we are talking about. In the second block, we are talking about what they are doing or what quality about them we are describing. In the third block, we can add information about the reason, time, process, or place that the action was done, or we can talk about why the quality was achieved by the person or the object. Let us look at this a little closely with some examples. Here, when it comes to action, we can add information regarding reason, we can add information regarding the process of the action, we can add information regarding the time of the action, and we can add information regarding the place of the action. An example of that would be the sentence, the queen picked at her food. So here, what am I talking? I mean, who am I talking about? I'm talking about the queen. And what did she do, or what is the action that I'm describing? She picked at her food. Now, if I want to add information about the reason of this action to this sentence, I will say, because she didn't want to eat it. So my sentence will be, the queen picked at her food because she didn't want to eat it. Now, what if I want to add information regarding the process of this action? That is, she ate very slowly. So my sentence will be, the queen picked at her food very slowly. If I want to add information regarding the time of this action, I can say after she saw the king had become thin. So my sentence will be, the queen picked at her food after she saw the king had become thin. Finally, if I want to add information regarding the place or where this activity took place, I will add the information on the dining table, on the table in the dining room. So my sentence will be, the queen picked at her food on the table in the dining room. Let's look at another example. Here, the sentence is, who are we talking about? We. What is an action we are talking about? Listen to announcements. Now, let's add information regarding the reason or the process or the time or the place of the action. Listen to announcements. So, we listen to announcements. Let me add information about the reason, because it helps us receive information. So, my sentence is, we listen to announcements because it helps us receive information. If I want to add information regarding the process, I will say, when we want information. Sorry, this is information regarding time, is when we want information. So we listen to announcements when we want information. Now I want to add information regarding the place. So, at public places. Now my sentence is, we listen to announcements at public places. So you can see here how we can use the third block, that is reason, process, time and place, to add information in sentences where we are talking about an action. This will help us during our lessons to give specific information to children about certain actions that we are talking about. Now, this would also go when we give students instructions. Many of you came up with wonderful sentences regarding instructions. Let me give you an example of an instruction here and also see how we can use the third block to add information or be very specific about the instruction. So here, who am I talking about? Students. What is the action that I'm talking about? They, what is the action that I want? Students need to listen to instructions. So my sentence is, students listen to instructions. What is the reason? Because you will need to remember what I am saying. So students listen to the instructions because you will need to remember what I am saying. Next, students listen to the instructions. How or what is the process that I want them to follow? I want them to be careful. So students listen to the instructions carefully. Next, what is the time that I want the instructions? Students listen to the instructions when I say start, and the place, students listen to the instructions at the beginning of activity number 22. Let us do the final. Secondly, and very quickly, here when I'm talking about a description, I will only add information regarding a reason, not process, time, or place. So punctuations is what I'm talking about. A description about punctuations is, it helps us understand clearly. What is the reason? It is because they organize writing. So punctuations help us understand clearly because they organize writing. Clever students are attentive because they like to learn. The king was sad because his dog ran away. So let us do the final activity here. Can you quickly add any reason to these sentences? Announcements about a bus are made for travelers, or a question mark is a punctuation. They are two description driven sentences. You have a quick time and of 2 minutes to add information regarding the reason to these sentences.
This brings us to the end of the session today.